Hello CS112, today I'll be going over a quick solution to homework 3 which has to do with the loops. Like I said in my previous video, if you were uncomfortable with the homework/projects topic, you should review your notes before starting, because it would add a lot of stress and time to your day if you were not comfortable with loops and you just tried to dive into this assignment. So before I start, I will be using a while loop for the first function. I'll be using a for loop in the second function, and I'll be using a for loop for the third function, but I will be using the for loop with the range length, the whole for I and range length way here, and here I'll just be using the classic for I and list. I will be adding timestamps to each of these, just so you guys can skip ahead and come back to as you please. And I also will be coding pretty much exclusively in Python Visualizer while pasting my code back into my text editor to test it with the tester. And so the reason I'm using Python Visualizer, when I was in CS112 myself, loops were very confusing to me, so using Python Visualizer's live programming mode really helped me visualize what's happening with loops and stuff like that. So again, Python Visualizer is just a Google search. You click on any of the Python tutors and you go to live programming mode. I'm just gonna make this half, and I'm going to copy the function signature over. So there we go. So now the very first thing you should do is fully read and understand what it's asking of you. If you're confused, please ask on Piazza, because if you're confused, then somebody else will have the same question. You can help out other people too. So you're going to be given a string text, and you want to return a new string that's in a zigzag rearrangement, as defined below, which you can see out here. But I would like to point out how it says you need to return a new string, because strings are immutable and you cannot change the string that they're giving to you. So you're given Georgia Mason here. I want to use this one because I like this example. And when I was back in the class, if anything was confusing to me, I'd draw it out. So what is this asking from you? So as you can see here, you're given this, this is your input text right here, right? The output text, what it does is it grabs the first character, then the last, then the second character, then the second to last, third to last, so on and so forth. And it's creating this zigzag sort of grabbing, right? Because you're grabbing sort of like that until you get into the middle. So right off the bat, you guys should know that, all right, I know how to iterate through a string already, because it can be seen as a list of characters where every character is just a letter. But how can I grab from both sides at the same time and concatenate it into my return string? That is sort of the million-dollar question for this. This is what this problem was wanting from you. So I'm going to start creating my code skeleton here. Obviously, if I'm using a while loop, I'm going to initialize my variables. So variables, I'm going to sort of create a short list of what I think I need to create there first. But the next thing I need to do is actually while loop it up. We'll come up with the Boolean guard for that later. Next, we need to grab front and then grab back, because we did grab the first letter first. Now, there are, obviously a couple things like, oh, what if it's an odd length list, or what if it's an even? And we'll get to that. We'll test our code and we'll get to that. So let's initialize the variables first. So obviously I'm going to need some sort of return string, which I'm going to call result. And then I'm going to be grabbing from the front and back. And as you guys know, I'm hoping you guys know how to index a list, when this can be seen as a list of characters because it's a string. I'm going to create a front variable and a back variable so I can index the string properly and grab what I want. This while loop. Now this tells you when to stop. How do I know when I'm going to stop here? If you remember my very well-drawn zigzag thing here, they sort of zigzagged when they met in the middle. They zigzagged and stopped once they got to these two characters here. And when did they come to these two characters here? If you draw out all of the indexes, so this would be 0, 1, 2, so on and so forth, you would see that they stopped once the front was less than the back. Or, I'm sorry, it stops once the front was greater than or equal to the back. So we want to loop while the front is less than the back. So that's going to be our Boolean guard. So I'm actually just going to code that right now. Why not? So if I can type while front is less than back, I'm going to do some stuff. And what am I going to do? I'm going to grab from the front, grab from the front and grab from the back. So let's see. I'm going to do results plus equals front, because that's what I said I wanted to do first, and then results plus equals back, because that's what I wanted to do next. Now, obviously, I need to initialize all these variables. Like I said right here, result, front, and back. Now, what was result? Result was just an empty string, which I want to return. Front is going to equal 0 because that is the first, will be the first letter at all times. And I could do negative indexing. If you guys, Python allows negative indexing. If you guys remember what that is, -1 will grab the last index, or in this case, letter of any size word. It could be less or greater than this. This will always grab the last character here. And this is -2, so on and so forth. I could set this equal to -1 and increment it that way, but I'm going to set it equal to the length of text because of this guard, because of my Boolean guard here. Because of the way I'm creating this Boolean guard, that is going to impact how I'm initializing back. If you guys initialize this differently, your Boolean guard would look different. So let's just test this. Let's see what's going on. All right, let's see what's going on. So again, I'm just going to copy and paste this test case right here. And I'm not going to paste it here. I'm going to paste it outside or on the same indentation level as my function. I'm going to hit enter. And right off the bat, we are with a type error, must be string and not an int. So let's see what's happening here. What I'm doing is I'm doing result plus equals front. And why did I even create these variables? So I can index a string, and this is not how you index, so that's just a silly error. So I need to do text and wrap it in those little brackets, and that's going to give me an error on the next line because that's the same error. All right, string index out of range. All right, so we're already cooking, guys. Good job, good job. So why is this? Why am I out of range? I'm just grabbing from the back, which is the length of text. If you guys remember, indexes, oops, that's not good. Give me a second, guys, gotta plug this guy in, but I'll try to talk while I'm plugging it in. But an index is the elements minus 1. So, well, all right, so we're good. So it's index minus 1. Or the index is the position minus 1. So again, we're starting at G. G is 0. N, in this case, it might be the 11th letter, but it's at index 10 because it's index equals element minus 1. So when initializing this bad boy, just gotta do -1. Now we're cooking. So obviously, we are in an infinite loop now because I am not updating my front and my back, my Boolean guard. I have to update this in my while loop. So I'm just going to say updates, and let's say front plus equals 1. Now what am I doing with my back? I need to say back minus equals 1 because I'm going in reverse order. So let's see what my return will be once I am returning. Let's return my result. Boom, boom. Return result. Okay, previous ones I will see this. That's interesting. That almost looks like what I'm supposed to return. I'm just going to copy and paste this over here so I can see what the result's supposed to be. I am missing the last letter. That is odd. Why is that? That is because front is now equal. Front and back are now equal to each other. So it's technically not less, or I'm sorry, 5 is not less than 5, so it didn't iterate that last time. So let's try updating my Boolean guard to be less than or equal to. I'm going to go to my last, I'm going to hit previous, and now, I have an extra. So this is where a lot of you guys are getting stuck, and this is where I would suggest doing, I'd say the easiest way to sort of work around this would just be to have a nice statement at the end here. Right before you return your result, simply checking if the length of your text modulus 2, I believe. Let me think about this. Yes, modulus 2 is equal to 1. Now, what is this even doing? What am I doing right now? What am I doing? What I'm doing is I am checking if the length of my string is equal to 1. I'm checking, or I'm sorry, a little brain fart here. I'm checking if my the string that I have in text is of odd length, which it is, and that's why I'm messing up right now. If it's of odd length, I'm simply going to do, I'm going to add the very last letter, right? I need, because I've been missing that last letter in my code when I had just less than. I'm going to do result plus equals text front. Now let's see what happens. Yes, that's good. Let's go to the last previous, and yes, beautiful. So let me explain what happened here. Why did I use text front? What's happening there? So remember, front is the one that's I'm missing here. Front was that last E. The front was the last thing I'm grabbing from. So again, if you guys were drawing it out on paper like I did here, you would see that it's not iterating that last time, even though it should, because this Boolean guard was messed up. And then when you tried making it equal to, so it would iterate that last time, it iterated an extra time. So this little guy right here will make sure that it will, if indeed the string is of an odd length, it will make sure to attack on that last guy. So let's go ahead and test this in my trusty old text editor here. I'm going to paste that guy right there, and I'm going to obviously hit Control S. That will save it. I'm going to bring up my command prompts, which is right here. I'm going to navigate to my OneDrive, to my TA folder, to my homework solution folder, hit enter. I'm going to type in Python, I'm going to type in the tester name, and my file name, which is just homework 3, and then I'm going to type in zigzag, because I just want to test out and see how my zigzag function is doing. Hit enter, boom, excellent. I have a syntax error. And yes, it's actually good that this came up. In my text file, I cannot just have these random definitions without anything inside them, so I'm going to comment them out real quick. Go back, oh, I gotta hit Control S. I'm going to go back here, and hit the up arrow key to get my last commands, hit enter, and beautiful. I passed all the tests for zigzag. So take a quick drink. And let's move on. So again, if you have any questions, leave a comment down below and I'll answer them to the best of my ability. Let us work on the next definition, which is the sum average one. So I'm really not going to spend that much time on this one. I thought this one was fairly straightforward. Again, it's all about really understanding the problem. That's what a lot of you guys, and I included, I sometimes, when I was in this class, it took me a while to really understand what it's asking of you. So, average. So it wants you to implement a function that returns the sum of the numbers in numList that have a greater value than the average of the value, or of the average value in that list. What that means is there are two steps. One, find the average of the list, and then you need to iterate it through again and find the create a sum of the numbers that are greater than that average. So obviously here the average of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is 3. It would iterate through it again and see, all right, 4 and 5 are greater than 3. You add those up and get 9, so on and so forth for these guys. So I am just gonna copy and paste this first one. So, and the expected output is 9. So I'm just gonna comment 9 right next to it so I know. Let's start coding. So I'm gonna be using a classic for loop in this one, so I don't really need to initialize any variables. But so my first for loop, number 1. For loop 1, I'm going to I'm going to find the average of the list, which is fairly straightforward. And now a lot of you guys were thinking you needed a nested loop for this, which you did not, because these are two independent steps where you're going to be returning something at the very ends of using those two independent steps. So a nested for loop would just overcomplicate things, let's say. So for loop 2 is where you would find some of numbers greater than the average. And those are the only two steps you need. So I'm going to initialize, actually, two variables, one for the average, I'm going to set that equal to 0, and one for my result again, equal to 0. So, find the average for a list. So obviously, something I did while learning about loops is I went to said for I in numList. And I'd say to myself, well, what am I working with here? What am I working with? Nums list I, like that? Or am I working with just I? So what I would do is I'd literally print it out. Every step I go, I say, all right, print I. Let's see, what am I working with I here? All right, print it out 1, and yeah, it's printing out the numbers here. It's not printing out the index. If it printed out the index, it would have been 0, not 1. So so I'm working with I here. That's what my average is going to be. So my average is going to equal or it's going to plus equals I. That is what I'm adding with here. And at the very end, if right here, if I started saying average divided by the length of the list, because that's what you need to do, I would mess up because this is still inside the for loop. So I need to go back outside the for loop. I need to say my average divide equal the length of the list, right? Because that's how you find the average. It's the sum of all divided by how many there are. So now my average equals that. Let's go ahead and see if that's working. Let's test our code as we go. Let's see if we're finding the average correctly. It should be 5. Let's go to last. I'm getting 3. It should be 3. I don't know why I kept saying it was 5. Yeah, the average of this is supposed to be 3. So now that I've found 3, I need to create my second for loop. So the average is 3. I have now created code to find the average up here. Let us lose my voice. Iterate through it again. So let's say for I in the lists, if I can type, I need to check something. I need to check if the value of if I is greater than, right? Not greater than or equal to. We saw that in the example. It has to be greater than. If it's greater than the average, to what are we going to do? We are going to add it to our results. So results plus equals I. And if you remember, I is still what we're working with here. So result plus equals I. And we're going to return I, or sorry, results. So let's see why this is wrong. Because I can't spell. Okay, let's see what we're getting here. Our return value is 9. Perfect. So, well, it works here. I could also copy and paste the rest of these guys here sort of see if I'm getting the correct output, but I'm just going to dive right into it and copy and paste it into my text editor. So again, I'm going to pull up my command prompt here. This time, I am going to hit the up arrow key. Wait, did I hit save? I hit save now. I'm going to hit the up arrow key, and instead of just having zigzag, I'm only going to type sum GT, which is average. Hit enter, and I failed into something. No, I'm getting division by 0. How can this be? So, as you can see, we can get past through an empty list. This is something that's perfect. They're giving us a little corner case here that we probably wouldn't have thought of on our own. How kind of them. So, we're given an empty list. What does this mean? We're given an empty list. So, we're given an empty list. Where am I going wrong? So, if we're given an empty list, it's going to try iterating through it. You know, it's obviously going to be empty, so nothing's going to happen. And then, boom, we're going to try to divide it by 0. The length of an empty list is 0. There's no length. Oh no. How can I fix this? This would be the perfect time. I'm not even going to do this in Python Visualizer. Very first thing you should check. What should it return? That's a good question. Yeah, it should return 0. That would make sense. Very first thing I'm going to say, if the length of num list is equal to 0, is equal to 0, return 0. And just add your function there. Very first thing you check. So it doesn't even have to visit all this code. It's just going to see this and be like, all right, well, has no length, so it's going to equal 0. So I'm going to save that. We'll go right here, hit the up arrow key, hit enter, and boom, I ran both those. I've passed all the tests for that. So now the last one. The last one was the trickiest one. I saw the most questions on Piazza about it, private and public. So let's just dive right into it because it's not too bad if you fully understand loops. So I'm going to print this guy right here. Another drink of water. Excuse me, losing my voice today. All right, so what are we working with here? Given a list of numbers, num lists, count how many ways unique pairs of values from this list have a sum equal to a value anywhere in the list, including once the values need to be added. Watch out for duplicates. All right, so pretty much you need to iterate through this list, and you need to find all the unique sums of 2 elements that are in this list. What do I mean by that? So if we just look at this first list right here, you have 1 plus 2. That equals 3. So that is good. So that's pairs plus 1, let's say. Then you're going to check 1 plus 3. Oh, that's 4. Nice. Pairs plus 1, that's going to equal 2. Then you're going to check 1 plus 4, which is 5 also in this list. Nice. You're going to check 1 plus 5, which is 6, which is not in this list. Then you're going to check 2 plus 3, which is 5. That's in this list. Nice. 2 plus 4 is 6. 2 plus 5 is 7, which are both not in this list. Then you're going to go to 3. 3 plus 4 is 7, not in this list, so on and so forth. And you'll realize soon enough that, yeah, it's not in this list. So the way I just explained to you how you're checking the adding, it should be screaming nested for loop at this point, right? Because you have one value that you're comparing with the rest of this list. It's the range that's what's tripping people up, that you need to sort of modify your for loop just a little bit to get your desired outcome. So I'm going to obviously have a result that I'm going to set equal to 0. However, I'm going to have two loops. The first is just going to be your average for I and range length num lists. Now, I'm going to be comparing, okay. So I need to, as I said, I'm just going to type it out. Sorry, there's really just no good way to explain this without just typing it out. So I'm just going to have for I in range something, because this is what's going to be changing every time. That was tripping people up. This I is going to remain the same for every loop of j. So when you guys should know how nested for loops work. During the first iteration, I is going to equal 1. We want j to equal 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, so we can test it with 1. And then during i's second iteration, it should be 2. So j can now test it with 3, 4, and 5. So how am I going to do this? How does the range function work? I'm saying for j in range, I plus 1, because we are starting at the next thing, I plus 1, and we want to iterate to the length of num list. That's our stopping point. Remember, it's start and stop, and if you had a third one, that's step, but we don't need that here because we want a nice clean iteration of every element. So now that we have what we are expecting will work, we're starting and stopping as we should here, we want to check if the sum of I and j is in the list num list. Now, again, how are we going to do this? Is it just I and j? I want to see what I'm working with here. Print I. I'm going to print out I, and obviously I need to call the function first, so I'm just going to use a first function call here. So let's see what it's printing out. It's printing out 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1. So yeah, it's printing out the incorrect thing, because I needed to print out 1, 1, 1, 1, and then 2, 2, 2, 2. But it's starting at 0, which means we're printing out the index. So that means we need to say num list I. That's what's really being defined here. And yes, we're starting at 1, because that is the actual value here. So if I called it with, let's say, spaghetti, that's what the first value would be. So obviously let's not use spaghetti, that's not good. So yes, that's the value, and it's going to be the same for j, num list j. So I'm going to copy and paste that because I don't want to type that out. So what are we checking? We're checking if numList I plus numList j is in, I'm actually going to wrap this in parentheses because I like doing that so I can see what's going on, and in case the interpreter gets confused, is in numList. Because what does this do? If you give value in container, that returns true or false. So that's a Boolean expression on its own there. All right. So if the sum of these is in the num list, we want our result to tick 1, right? We want it to be like, all right, nice, we have a pair, we're counting it. Let's go ahead and return count to see what happens. Return count, we go to our last step, hit previous. What was that? Counts is not defined. Yes, it is not defined because, why did I say counts? That's interesting. Probably saw count right here. All right, yes, let's see our return value 4. Excellent, that's just what we wanted. Let's try it with the second one that they did on the sheet. I'm just going to copy and paste it right over that. Go to our last, hit previous, boom, 7, excellent. So, I know what you guys are thinking. You guys are thinking, wow. You guys are thinking, how does this even work? This whole thing right here, this starting from this parenthesis down, it might have confused you guys for being like, oh, they don't allow duplicates, as in like 1 plus 1 is the same as this 1 plus this 1. But then it would count something like this 1 plus this 0 and this 1 plus this 0. So if you drew it out, like I tried sort of just like going like this, so comparing the first 1 to 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, where I is going to be 1 and j will represent one of 2, 3, 4, and 5 on an iteration, you would realize that that wouldn't even matter. You wouldn't have to check this 1 plus this 1, because that wouldn't be part of the iteration. Once we get this down, so 1, 2, let me copy and paste this into here. This is what was really tripping people up on the thing. So let me just have a text box here. Let me hit enter. So make this very big. So our first iteration, this is I. J is going to equal 2, then 3, then 1, then 0, right? Because we're doing 1 plus 2, 1 plus 3, 1 plus 4, 1 plus 0. During our next iteration, this will become I. I is now 2, and we'll never see this 1 again as I. We're just going to be doing 2 plus 3, 2 plus 1, 2 plus 0, so on and so forth. So once we get to this 1 right here, once we get to the second 1, we're never going to see this 1 plus this 1, because this will be gone. I is now 3. All 3 is checking is if 3 plus 1 is in this list, which is not, and then 3 plus 0 is in this list, which it is. Yeah, it's never going to come back to here and check that. It will never do that. So you don't have to care about duplicates if you are iterating correctly, and that's what I did in my solution. But of course, you guys probably wouldn't believe me that this works until I test it in my code. So I'm going back into, where am I going here? Back into here. What was this? All right. Okay, sorry about that. I'm going to copy and paste right into here. I'm going to hit Control S, which saves it. I'm going to bring up the CMD. I closed my CMD, guys. I absolutely despise when I close my CMD. I have to go all the way back to where it previously was, which is TACS, Homework Solutions. Then I'm going to have to type in Python, followed by the tester. The tester file of H3, followed by my actual coding assignments, and you see that beautiful OK. So I want you guys to ask me any questions. If you have any questions about what I just went over, I might have gone fast on some parts you might have been struggling with, and just let me know if anything is confusing to you. I hope you guys understood why this code could have just been very simple because of the way I and J act in a nested for loop. If you guys need a better visual representation of that, something you guys could do is on your own time, go into Python Visualizer, type in for I in, sorry, I'm gonna have to actually create a list, but this is literally what I did. So I'd create a random list of numbers. I would say for I in X, and then say for j in X, print, I'm going to print out I, but I'm also going to print out, I'm going to say, put a little colon there, I'm also going to print out J so I can see how they act with each other in here, so I can see what's happening. So as you can see, during the first iteration I is always 1, but I is being compared to every single element in J. So if I were to start clicking through, like as you can see this red thing here, if I were to start clicking through, it's now my for loop. It enters the for loop. It's now going to iterate through, it's going to keep bouncing here. This is sort of like looping through this for loop until it gets to 5. So 3, you can see it's printing out here, 4, 5. Now it got through X for J in X. It passed all the values. It's going to go back up to this loop. And that's going to enter it again, right? It's going to keep doing these mini iterations to 5 until I can reach its bigger iteration to 5. You can even have for like T in X, for like L in X. You can go on and have an infinite amount of for loops. Obviously, this is so inefficient, but it's good to like know what is happening. So there's really the best way you can learn it is by actually practicing, and I feel like Python Visualizer is a great tool for that. So let me know if you guys have any questions on the solutions I just went over, and I hope this video was helpful.